She was just a quiet presence on the training ground, barely acknowledged by the instructors, mostly overlooked by the recruits. When she stepped up to the range, someone muttered, "She's not ready." The room chuckled, but one SEAL didn't laugh. He walked forward, handed her his personal Barrett Point .60 Cal sniper rifle, a weapon no one else was ever allowed to touch, and stepped back. What happened next silenced the entire base. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of unrecognized excellence, consider subscribing for more untold military narratives. The briefing room hummed with low conversation as 12 elite operators settled into their seats. These were the best of the best, selected for the most advanced sniper training the military offered. 11 men and 1 woman, all with combat experience, all with confirmed kills. Their postures betrayed a casual confidence as they arranged their notebooks and tablets, some comparing notes from the previous day's field exercise. Chief Petty Officer Riker strode to the front of the room, his presence immediately commanding silence. At 42, with silver beginning to thread through his close-cropped hair, he carried himself with the gravity of a man who had seen more combat than most generals. His weathered face bore the permanent tan lines of the tactical eyewear. "Today we're covering terminal ballistics in extreme weather conditions," he announced, tapping his tablet to project ballistic tables onto the screen. "When you're taking a shot at 1,800 yards with a 30-knot crosswind and 15-degree temperature variance between you and the target, these calculations become life or death." In the back corner sat Wren Adler, slender, unremarkable in appearance, wearing civilian clothes with a Department of Defense contractor badge clipped to her navy blue blazer. For 3 weeks, she had been a shadow in the room, her presence explained only by paperwork from the Pentagon that the instructors clearly resented. The document stated she was observing training protocols for analytical purposes, nothing more. She wrote in a leather-bound notebook, her handwriting precise and technical. None of the operators acknowledged her. None had bothered to learn her name. Riker continued his lecture on wind calculation methods, pointing to complex formulas on the screen. When engaging targets beyond 1,500 yards, you need to account for multiple wind zones. A misreading at any point will send your round off by meters, not centimeters. The door opened with a slight creak. Commander Leith Blackwood entered, a man whose reputation preceded him. 4 distinguished tours as a SEAL sniper, holder of the 3rd longest confirmed kill in military history. Unlike Riker's weathered appearance, Blackwood moved with a fluid economy that belied his 45 years. His eyes, a startling pale blue, scanned the room with an intensity that made junior operators instinctively straighten their posture. "Commander," Riker acknowledged with a nod. Blackwood scanned the room, his gaze pausing momentarily on Wren. Unlike the others who had been ignoring her for weeks, he offered a slight nod of recognition before taking position against the wall. "As I was saying," Riker continued, "your spotter can give you wind calls, but ultimately you need to feel it. Science only gets you so far." During the discussion of high-angle shooting, Wren made her first ever comment, suggesting a modification to the standard formula for Coriolis effect at extreme distances. Her voice was clear, but not loud, professional, but not authoritative. Riker barely glanced her way. "Theory is fine at your desk in Washington, ma'am, but out here, we deal with reality." The class chuckled. Merrick, the class leader with 3 Afghanistan tours under his belt, didn't bother hiding his smirk. Wren returned to her notebook without reaction, making another notation in her precise handwriting. After the morning session, the operators filed out for their midday meal. Wren gathered her materials slowly, allowing the room to clear before she stood. As she turned to leave, she found Commander Blackwood standing in her path. "Ms. Adler, is it?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Yes, Commander," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Your observation about the Coriolis calculation was interesting, not standard doctrine." "Thank you, sir. It was just a thought." Blackwood studied her for a moment. "Thoughts like that don't come from nowhere. Enjoy your lunch, Ms. Adler." In the mess hall, Wren sat alone at the end of a table, her tray containing a modest portion of the day's offering. As she ate methodically, she reviewed her notes from the morning session, occasionally glancing at the operators who sat together several tables away, laughing at some shared joke. As she flipped through her notebook, A worn photograph became briefly visible. A military funeral, the Marine Corps emblem visible on the folded flag, being presented to a woman whose face was obscured. Behind her stood a teenage girl, straight-backed and stoic, despite the tears tracking down her face. Wren quickly tucked the photo away when she noticed Blackwood observing from across the room. Their eyes met briefly before she returned to her meal. That evening, Blackwood reviewed personnel files in his office. The standard-issue desk lamp cast harsh shadows across his face as he pulled a classified folder marked Project Kingfisher. Inside were technical specifications for next-generation ballistic computing systems, designed to account for variables that current systems couldn't process fast enough for field use. Attached was a personnel file with a photo of Wren Adler, but with a very different title than DoD Observer. Blackwood studied the file intently, his expression revealing nothing. The next day dawned with challenging weather. Gray clouds scudded across the sky, pushed by winds that changed direction seemingly at random, perfect conditions for what Riker had planned. The class assembled at the most challenging range on the compound, a shooting lane extending through a valley with crosswinds that changed direction between the shooter and the target. The objective? A 1,750-yard shot requiring compensation for multiple wind vectors. This simulates the Hindu Kush conditions, Riker explained as the operators prepared their equipment. You'll need to read all 3 wind zones correctly, or you'll miss by meters. In the field, that means mission failure. Wren stood back from the firing line, her notebook open and a pair of compact spotting binoculars hanging around her neck. As usual, no one acknowledged her presence. One by one, the operators attempted the shot. Even the most experienced missed repeatedly. The woman, Lieutenant Cassidy, came closest on her second attempt, missing by just 8 inches. Still a complete miss in combat terms. Frustration built with each failure. The wind was unpredictable, shifting directions between the firing line and the target in ways that were difficult to read and impossible to time perfectly. This is why we train, Riker reminded them. In real-world conditions, nature doesn't cooperate. Petty Officer Merrick, the class leader, made his 3rd attempt and missed by inches. The impact kicked up dirt visibly to the right of the human-sized target. "Damn it," he growled, standing up from the firing position. He was the last to shoot, and not a single operator had hit the target. Wren stood behind the line, making occasional notes. Her eyes tracked the mirage effect through her spotting scope, recording something the others weren't seeing. Her pen moved continuously, noting angles, directions, speeds. Merrick noticed her writing and bristled. Who was this civilian to document their failures? "Hey," he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe our observer wants to show us how it's done? Probably easier from behind a desk." Several operators laughed. Riker allowed himself a thin smile. "She's not ready," he said dismissively. "This isn't a simulation or whatever they play with at the DoD. Wren didn't respond, didn't even look up from her notebook. The group's attention shifted as Commander Blackwood, who had been silently observing from the edge of the range, suddenly walked to his personal gear case that had been sitting unopened near the equipment shed. A hush fell over the range as he unlocked the reinforced case and removed his custom Barrett-pointed .60 caliber rifle. A weapon legendary within special operations circles, not just for its devastating power, but because Blackwood never allowed anyone else to handle it. The rifle was a marvel of engineering, with custom machined parts and a scope worth more than most family cars. Operators whispered about it, but none had ever fired it, not even Riker. Without speaking, Blackwood walked directly to Wren, extended the rifle, and simply said, "Show them." The range fell silent. Riker's smile vanished, replaced by confusion and the beginning of protest. Merrick stood straighter, eyes narrowing. Wren looked at the rifle, then at Blackwood. Something passed between them, an understanding that no one else could interpret. She closed her notebook, set it aside, and took the weapon with practiced hands. Every eye on the range followed her as she moved to the firing position Merrick had just vacated. There was a subtle shift in her demeanor, a straightening of her spine, a setting of her shoulders, a focus in her gaze that hadn't been there moments before. The operators exchanged glances as she checked the weapon with surprising familiarity, confirming the chamber adjusting the stock extension perfectly for her frame and making minute adjustments to the scope settings that even the instructors wouldn't have attempted on Blackwood's prized rifle. As she settled into position, Blackwood finally broke the silence. "Lieutenant Colonel Ren Adler," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent range. "Marine Corps, 7 deployments with Force Recon, expert instructor at Quantico before transferring to Special Operations Command." The class was stunned into silence. Riker's expression shifted from dismissal to confusion, then to dawning realization. Merrick looked as though he had been physically struck. Ren lay prone, completely transformed from the quiet observer they had ignored for weeks. Her breathing changed, her body settling into the earth with perfect alignment. She made microscopic adjustments to the scope windage that even the instructors didn't recognize. For 30 seconds, she simply observed the range, watching heat mirages and grass movement at different distances. The operators held their breath. Blackwood stood motionless, his face unreadable. Then, with absolute focus, Ren controlled her breathing, timed her heartbeat, and squeezed the trigger with perfect pressure. The Barrett roared, the massive recoil absorbed efficiently by her precisely positioned body. Through their spotting scopes, the class watched as the round traveled the 1,750 yards, cutting through the shifting winds as if they weren't there. The impact was dead center on the target. The spotters confirmed the hit through their scopes, their disbelief evident in their silence. The shot had not just hit the target, it had struck the exact center mass, a shot that would have been impressive in perfect conditions, let alone in the swirling winds that had defeated every seasoned operator on the range. Ren stood smoothly and returned the Barrett to Commander Blackwood with the same care with which she had accepted it. "Thank you, Commander," she said quietly. "Your barrel harmonics are slightly off at the 3rd rifling groove. You might want to have that checked." Blackwood accepted his weapon with a nod, suppressing a smile as he inspected the rifle. The other operators remained frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. Chief Riker stepped forward, his entire demeanor changed. The dismissive instructor was gone, replaced by a professional, suddenly reassessing everything he thought he knew. "Who are you really?" he asked. "Why are you here?" Ren squared her shoulders, transforming once more, this time from shooter to briefer. The hesitant observer was gone completely. "I'm not observing your training methods, Chief," she explained. "I'm evaluating your equipment. I designed the next-generation ballistic compensation system being installed in your rifles next month. The Pentagon thought you might resist taking advice from someone who didn't come through your program." Merrick stepped forward. "You're saying you created Kingfisher? That's your system?" Ren nodded. "Project Kingfisher is a complete overhaul of ballistic computing for special operations snipers. It accounts for variables current systems ignore or calculate too slowly for field use." "So this was some kind of test?" Lieutenant Cassidy asked, the only female operator in the class. "Not of you," Ren clarified. "Of the equipment you're using. I needed to understand its limitations in practical application before finalizing the replacement." Commander Blackwood secured his rifle back in its case before addressing the group. "Lieutenant Colonel Adler has been developing targeting systems for special operations for nearly a decade. Her work in Afghanistan saved more lives than most of you have rounds through your barrels." The shock on their faces was evident. For 3 weeks they had ignored, dismissed, and occasionally mocked someone whose contributions to their profession exceeded their combined experience. "I believe," Blackwood continued, "that Colonel Adler has some information that might improve your performance tomorrow. I suggest we adjourn to the briefing room." 20 minutes later, the same operators who had laughed at Ren's suggestion that morning sat attentively as she stood at the front of the briefing room. Gone was the hesitant demeanor. She spoke with quiet authority, displaying technical schematics on the screen that showed the inner workings of Project Kingfisher. "Current ballistic computers use linear calculations based on known variables," she explained, pointing to a complex diagram. "Wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. What they don't account for is how these variables interact across distance in complex terrain." She clicked to the next slide, showing a 3-dimensional model of the range they had just used. "This valley creates 3 distinct wind zones. Your spotters can read the nearest zone accurately, estimate the middle reasonably well, but are essentially guessing at the farthest zone. Project Kingfisher uses topographical mapping and multiple sensor inputs to model all three zones simultaneously. For the next hour, Wren explained the technology with the precision of someone who had not only designed it, but had used it in the field. The operators asked increasingly technical questions, which she answered without hesitation. Even Riker, initially sitting with arms crossed defensively, began taking notes. After the session concluded, the operators filed out with a new respect, evident in their demeanor. Several nodded to Wren as they passed, a small gesture that spoke volumes in the elite community where respect was earned, never given. Chief Riker remained behind, waiting until the room had cleared before approaching Wren as she gathered her materials. "I owe you an apology, ma'am," he said stiffly. "I made assumptions based on incomplete information." Wren looked up from her papers. "It's the results that matter, Chief, not the recognition." "Still," he persisted, "I should have done my homework, known who I was dealing with." "My background was intentionally left vague," she admitted. "We needed honest assessments of current capabilities, not performances aimed at impressing the visitor." Riker nodded slowly. "May I ask a question, Colonel? That shot today, was it the technology, or was it you?" Wren allowed herself a small smile. "Both, Chief. The best technology in the world is still just a tool. It's only as good as the person using it." As Riker left, Commander Blackwood entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Wren, who accepted it gratefully. "You could have told them who you were from the beginning," he observed, leaning against the desk. "And missed all this fun?" she replied dryly, sipping the coffee. Blackwood's expression sobered. "Your father would be proud, Wren." Her cup paused halfway to her lips. She set it down carefully. "You knew him well?" Blackwood nodded. "We served together in Fallujah, 2004. His marksmanship saved my team during an ambush. 23 confirmed kills in a single operation. But it wasn't just his shooting that impressed me. It was his understanding of the science behind it. He could explain the physics of a bullet's flight path better than most university professors." Wren's fingers traced the edge of her notebook. "He tried to teach me everything he knew, said I had a natural aptitude for it." "He was right," Blackwood said. "I recognized your name the moment I saw the assignment order. Kept wondering when you were going to demonstrate what I suspected you could do." "I wasn't here to shoot," she reminded him. "I was here to observe." "And yet," Blackwood pressed, "when I handed you that rifle, you didn't hesitate. That wasn't just theoretical knowledge out there today." Wren was silent for a long moment. "After Dad died, I wanted to follow his path. Applied to Scout Sniper School 3 times. Was denied each time. Not the right MOS, not the right background. Eventually, I realized I could contribute in other ways. By designing the systems that would make every sniper better," Blackwood finished for her. She nodded. "If I couldn't be in the field, I could at least make sure those who were had every advantage possible. And yet, you still maintained your skills." "Old habits," she said simply. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, perfect conditions for the range. The operators arrived to find Wren already present, not in her usual place at the back, but up front with Chief Riker. Her civilian blazer was gone, replaced by standard-issue tactical pants and a Marine Corps t-shirt. Her hair, usually kept in a neat bun, was secured under a ball cap bearing the Force Recon emblem. "Colonel Adler has agreed to work with us today," Riker announced without preamble. "She'll be demonstrating the practical applications of the techniques she described yesterday. I expect everyone to pay attention." The day unfolded differently than any previous training session. Wren moved among the operators, making small corrections to their positions, explaining the subtle nuances of wind reading that went beyond what their formal training had covered. Lieutenant Cassidy approached Wren during a break, clearly wanting to ask something, but hesitating. "Go ahead, Lieutenant," Wren encouraged. "How did you deal with it?" Cassidy asked quietly. "Being the only woman in spaces like this?" Wren considered her answer carefully. "I stopped focusing on being the only woman and concentrated on being the best at what I do. Excellence can't be denied forever, though sometimes it takes longer than it should to be recognized." Cassidy nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you, ma'am." By mid-afternoon, the improvement in the class's performance was remarkable. Shots that had been impossible the day before were now landing with consistency, if not the same precision Wren had demonstrated. Commander Blackwood observed from the sidelines, occasionally conferring with Riker. Both men watched as Wren worked with Merrick on his breathing control, her instruction firm but respectful. The petty officer who had mocked her the day before now listened with complete attention. "She's a natural instructor," Riker commented. "Like her father," Blackwood agreed. "He could have written the manual if he'd lived long enough." "What happened to him?" Riker asked. "Ambush outside Kandahar, 2010. Insurgents had studied his pattern, knew he'd come back for a wounded Marine. They were waiting with an IED. Blackwood's expression darkened with the memory. He saved 3 lives that day, but couldn't save his own. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Wren gathered the operators for a final demonstration. She had set up a new drill, a moving target at 1,200 yards, traversing unpredictably. "This is what Kingfisher was ultimately designed for," she explained. "Not just accounting for environmental factors, but predictive tracking for moving targets. The system calculates probable movement patterns based on terrain and visible behavior." She nodded to Blackwood, who activated a remote control. A target drone began moving along the distant ridge, its pattern erratic and seemingly random. Wren took position behind a standard-issue M40A6, not Blackwood's custom Barrett. The operators watched intently as she tracked the target through her scope, her breathing measured and controlled. 3 shots rang out in quick succession. Through their spotting scopes, the class confirmed 3 direct hits on the moving target, a feat that would have been considered nearly impossible with their current equipment. "That," Wren said as she stood, "is what Project Kingfisher will enable. Your expertise combined with advanced predictive computing. The system doesn't replace your skills, it enhances them." As the class dispersed for the evening meal, there was a new energy among them. The technology they had just witnessed promised capabilities beyond what they had thought possible. Wren packed up her equipment methodically, her movements precise and efficient. As she closed her notebook, Blackwood approached. "The Pentagon called," he said quietly. "They want you back in Washington tomorrow. Apparently, there's some urgency about the final testing phase." Wren nodded. "I've seen what I needed to see here." "Will you come back?" Blackwood asked. "When the systems are deployed?" "If they want me to," she replied. "There's still fine-tuning to be done based on what I've observed." "They'll want you to," Blackwood assured her. "I'll make sure of it." As they walked back toward the facility buildings, the setting sun cast long shadows across the training grounds. Behind them, the operators who had once dismissed Wren Adler as just an observer now discussed her techniques with newfound respect. The following morning, Wren arrived at the briefing room earlier than usual. She had packed her few belongings, preparing for the return to Washington, but wanted one final session with the class before departure. The room was empty when she entered, giving her a moment of quiet reflection on the past month. She placed her notebook on the instructor's table and looked around the austere space. When she had first arrived, she had been viewed as an unwelcome intrusion, a civilian observer who couldn't possibly understand the realities of their profession. Now, her expertise had been demonstrated beyond question. The door opened and Commander Blackwood entered. He carried a folder stamped with classified markings. "I thought you might want to see this before you leave," he said, placing it on the table before her. "The preliminary reports from the operational tests of Kingfisher in Afghanistan." Wren opened the folder, her eyes quickly scanning the technical data. 78% improvement in first-round hit probability at extreme distances, she read aloud. "That's better than our projections." "Your father's theory was right," Blackwood said quietly, "about the harmonic vibrations of the barrel affecting trajectory at extreme distances. The compensation algorithm you designed accounts for it perfectly." Wren closed the folder, her expression softening slightly. "He was always obsessed with that theory, used to bore me with it for hours when I was a teenager. I didn't understand why it mattered so much until I started working on Kingfisher." "He knew someday it would save lives," Blackwood replied, "just like he knew you were the one who would figure it out." Before she could respond, the door opened again and the class began filing in. There was a notable difference in how they regarded her now. Respectful nods, direct eye contact. Lieutenant Cassidy even offered a small smile. Chief Riker entered last, carrying a tactical case. He placed it on the table beside Wren's notebook. "Before you head back to Washington," he said, We wanted to present you with something. He opened the case to reveal an M40A6 sniper rifle, the same model used by Marine Scout snipers, but with subtle modifications. The stock bore a small engraved plate with her name and the Force Recon emblem. This is the first rifle fully calibrated with your Kingfisher system, Riker explained. Serial number 001. The team thought it should go to the person who made it possible. Wren stared at the weapon, momentarily at a loss for words. In her 15 years of service, through countless innovations and improvements to combat systems, she had never received such a tangible acknowledgement of her contributions. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "This means more than you know." "We also have something else," Blackwood added. He nodded to Merrick, who stepped forward. "Ma'am," Merrick began, his previous arrogance replaced with genuine respect. "We'd like to request that you run us through a final practical demonstration before you leave. Not as an observer, but as an instructor." Wren looked around the room at the expectant faces of the operators who had dismissed her just days before. Their expressions now showed nothing but professional respect. "I'd be honored," she replied. An hour later, the class assembled at the range. This time, Wren stood at the center of the firing line. The operators gathered around her as she explained advanced techniques for wind calling across multiple zones. "The key is understanding that wind doesn't move in a uniform direction," she explained, pointing to the valley. "Terrain creates turbulence patterns. Look for indicators at different distances. Grass movement near the firing position, dust at mid-range, mirage effects near the target. Each tells you something different." She demonstrated the technique with her newly presented rifle, calling out her observations before each shot. 3 consecutive rounds at 1,500 yards, each landing within an inch of the previous impact, despite changing wind conditions. The operators took turns applying her methods, their accuracy improving noticeably with each attempt. Even Riker tried his hand, landing a shot that would have been beyond his capabilities the day before. As the morning progressed, Wren worked with each operator individually, addressing their specific challenges. With Lieutenant Cassidy, she spent extra time discussing how different body mechanics might require slight adjustments to standard shooting positions. "The manual was written for the average male body," Wren explained quietly. "Sometimes you need to adapt. Finding your optimal position isn't breaking protocol. It's maximizing performance." Cassidy nodded gratefully. "They don't teach us that in basic sniper school." "They should," Wren replied. "Maybe someday they will." By midday, the improvement in the entire class was evident. Shots that would have been considered lucky hits were now being made consistently. The operators moved with new confidence, applying Wren's principles to each attempt. During a break, Commander Blackwood approached Wren as she made notes on the morning's performance. "Washington called again," he said. "They've moved up your briefing to tomorrow morning. A car will be here in an hour to take you to Andrews." Wren nodded, closing her notebook. "I've seen what I needed to see. The system works even better in the field than in the lab. With proper training, these operators will be able to engage targets that would have been considered beyond effective range just a year ago." "It's not just the system," Blackwood observed. "It's how you've taught them to use it. Technology is only as good as the operator's understanding of it." "My father used to say the same thing," she replied with a slight smile. "A sniper rifle in untrained hands is just an expensive club." "Sounds like him," Blackwood chuckled. He never missed an opportunity for a teaching moment. As they walked back toward the main facility, Blackwood's expression turned serious. "There's something else you should know before you leave. I've recommended you for a position here, heading up the Advanced Ballistics Training Division. The Pentagon has already approved it, if you're interested." Wren stopped walking, surprised by the offer. "You want me to leave R&D and come back to the field?" "I want you to do both," Blackwood clarified. "Continue your development work, but with direct input from the operators who will use your systems. No more being the observer in the back of the room. Lead from the front." She considered the proposal, looking out across the training grounds where operators were still practicing the techniques she had taught them. After years of being denied the opportunity to serve in the capacity she had originally sought, the irony wasn't lost on her. "I'll think about it," she promised. "But first, I need to get Kingfisher across the finish line." An hour later, Wren stood by the facility entrance, her bags packed and waiting beside her. The class had gathered to see her off, a gesture that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Chief Riker stepped forward, extending his hand. "Thank you, Colonel, for the technology and the training." "Thank you, Chief, for keeping an open mind," she replied as they shook hands. Eventually, he had the good grace to look slightly embarrassed before nodding respectfully. Lieutenant Cassidy approached next. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say that what you showed us, what you taught us, it matters, especially to me." "You're a good shooter, Lieutenant," Wren said. "Trust your instincts and your training. The rest will follow." One by one, the operators said their goodbyes, each expressing gratitude for what they had learned. Merrick was the last to approach. "Colonel," he said formally, "I owe you an apology for my behavior. It was unprofessional." "Already forgotten, Petty Officer," she assured him. "Just remember that expertise doesn't always come in the package you expect." "Yes, ma'am," he agreed. "That's a lesson I won't forget." As the black government SUV pulled up to the curb, Commander Blackwood stepped forward with the rifle case containing her presentation weapon. "Don't forget this," he said, handing it to her. "It's the physical proof of what you've accomplished here." "Thank you, Commander," she replied, accepting the case. "For everything." "The offer stands," he reminded her. "When you're ready?" Wren nodded, then turned to address the assembled operators one last time. "Gentlemen, Lieutenant," she said, her voice carrying across the group. "What you do matters. The technology we develop, the systems we create, they're all designed for one purpose: to give you the edge you need to complete your missions and come home safely. Never forget that there are people behind the scenes dedicated to making sure you have every possible advantage." With that, she turned and walked to the waiting vehicle. As it pulled away, she looked back at the group still standing at attention, Commander Blackwood at their center. Years of being overlooked, of having her expertise questioned, of fighting for a place at the table, all had led to this moment of vindication. The SUV turned onto the main road, and Wren opened her notebook to review her notes from the training session. There were still improvements to be made to Kingfisher, refinements based on what she had observed in the field. Her mind was already racing with possibilities. Her satellite phone rang, Pentagon calling with updated briefing details. As she answered, she glanced down at the rifle case beside her. The nameplate caught the sunlight. Lieutenant Column Wren Adler, USMC Force Recon. Below it, in smaller engraving, was a quote her father had often repeated: "Excellence cannot remain unrecognized forever." 6 months later, under a clear Afghan sky, a Marine sniper team lay in position on a rocky outcropping. Lieutenant Cassidy peered through the advanced scope of her M40A6, now fully equipped with the Kingfisher system. Beside her, her spotter monitored conditions through a linked targeting computer. Wind variable, 3 zones, 15 to 18 knots, the spotter reported. Target distance 1750 meters, moving evasively. "Kingfisher online," Cassidy confirmed, watching as the system calculated the complex variables and displayed the solution in her scope, adjusting for barrel harmonics, atmospheric conditions, and target movement. She controlled her breathing, focused her mind, and applied the techniques Wren had taught her. The shot broke clean, the round traveling the extreme distance through swirling mountain winds. Through her scope, she watched as the high-value target dropped, a perfect center mass hit. "Target down," her spotter confirmed. "1 shot, 1 kill." As they began their careful extraction, Cassidy thought about the woman who had made this shot possible, not just through technology, but through the confidence and knowledge she had imparted. The woman everyone had dismissed as not ready until a commander had handed her his personal rifle and let her show the world exactly who she was. At the Pentagon, Wren Adler stood before a room of generals and defense officials, presenting the performance data from Kingfisher's first 6 months of field deployment. The statistics were beyond even the most optimistic projections. 86% improvement in first-round hit probability, 63% increase in effective range, 41% reduction in time to target acquisition. "In conclusion," she stated confidently, "Project Kingfisher has fundamentally changed the capabilities of our special operations snipers. Shots previously considered high risk or impossible are now being made consistently under combat conditions. As the briefing concluded to approving nods, her phone vibrated with a message from Commander Blackwood. "Position still open. When you're ready." Wren smiled slightly as she gathered her materials. Perhaps it was time to step out from behind the scenes and into the role she had always been meant to fill, not just designing the systems that saved lives, but teaching others to use them to their full potential. Sometimes, she reflected, the most valuable people in a room are the ones you don't notice, until they show you what excellence truly means.